This is NNN. It's Friday, May the 1st, and this is the Norval News Network, the network that answers the question, what's new at Norval? I'm your host, Mr. LG, and this week we'll be looking at backyard bird feeders, beehives, part 2 of Mr. Parcher's series on wild turkey hunting, creating pesto from garlic mustard, and the man who planted daffodils. Let's take a closer look. Do you love watching birds? So does Mr. Evans. Let's hear some of his wisdom on how to set up the best backyard bird feeders ever.
Thanks, Mr. LG. My name's Mr. Evans. UCC boys, welcome to my bird feeders. We have every style of feeder that you can imagine. So we've got our regular house feeders, we've got our suet feeders, we even got a squirrel baffler, but this one's my favorite. This one right here spins anything that's not a bird off. So if a squirrel tries to go down here, lands on this, it has a battery power in it which spins it off. Right? Super cool. Right? Right? With this, we've had a chance to see more birds than usual because we've been home a lot. I'm going to show you what I've seen so far. Set up a bird feeder in your backyard, check out what comes to your bird feeder, and enjoy. Thanks very much, Mr. LG. Back to you.
Thanks, Mr. Evans. And now let's go to Miss Corley, our Norval correspondent, who's going to tell us about the bees at Norval. Over to you, Miss Corley.
The bees have been buzzing here at Norval, and I'm here at the Norval beehives to see what all the buzz is about. Let's go check it out. I've gotten down on level with these bees, and they are quite active today. Even though it's overcast, it's really interesting to see them from this view. I'm gonna get a closer look and see what they're up to. This hive is super active right now. The bees are constantly going in and out to go and find nectar and pollen and bring it back and enter from the bottom of the hive. I know what some of you might be thinking. She's in the beehives without a bee suit. And what's really interesting is bees will actually match your energy. So as long as I'm staying calm and friendly and relaxed, then these bees see me as no threat, and they're perfectly comfortable with me walking around, hanging out, and taking a closer look at what they're up to. Pretty awesome. Here's a really good example of some pollen pants this bee has collected during its hunt for nectar and flowers. Each one of these boxes is a single colony of bees. These hives can house up to 80,000 bees. That is a lot of roommates. In our Norval hive, these bees are very busy today. Every single worker bee in the hive has a different job. These bees spend all spring and summer making honey so they have food for the winter. They make more than enough, so we always add more stacks, and that way they continue to make honey, and then there's some for us to use in the winter and enough for them to live off of when it's really cold and they have to hibernate. One way to help the bees in your neighborhood is to make sure you've got some different pollinator plants that they like to visit in your backyard. Do a little research and see if you can add some plants to help the bees out on their hunt for nectar and pollen. And if you look really close, you can see this bee has some pollen pants on its legs where it can get the pollen stuck, and by having pollen stuck to its legs, it can transfer pollen to different plants and help pollinate flowers here at Norval. I'm gonna head out and allow these bees to do their thing, so back to you, Mr. LG.
Thanks, Ms. Corley. This week I look into something a little bit different. The story of a man who's planted thousands of daffodil bulbs in Norval over the last half-century. So I'm here at the entrance to the village of Norval, a little town just at the bottom, about 1 kilometer away from the driveway to Upper Canada College, Norval. When I first moved to Georgetown about 20 years ago, I remember being surprised when I walked along the road from the village of Norval to UCC by how many daffodils there were along the roadside. There were hundreds and hundreds of daffodils. They haven't all survived the 20 years, but if you crouch down and look right here, see these long stems here? That's daffodil. There's a bulb in the ground by each of these, and probably it's not getting enough sunlight because of all the cover here, so these might only flower once every couple of years. But there were literally hundreds of daffodils planted along the roadside between the village of Norval and Upper Canada College. There's an interesting story about why there are so many daffodils on the road to Norval, and that's what I'd like to share with you this week. So this is the main entrance to the Norval Outdoor School, and just across the street from us is a very inconspicuous driveway that goes into the forest. And that driveway belongs to the Pettingill family. Tom Pettingill, who lives there, is 96 years old, and he's lived there since 1956. And one of the things that he's done all his life is plant daffodils. And I managed to meet with Tom this week to hear his story. So thank you very much for agreeing to speak to me, Tom. Because I'm over 6 feet away, if you wouldn't mind speaking up, but I'm just interested in, tell me the story first off. How long have you lived here?
About, let me see, 65 or 6 years.
Wow.
In this house.
In this house?
I built it myself.
Really? And you can see the daffodils behind you here. What made you decide to start planting daffodils?
I've always liked daffodils, and in England, I was born in England, in an area where my sister lived. There was it's very flat land, and the flat bottom of the river valley was more or less, you could say, wild with daffodils. And I've always liked the daffodils. They are the first big, powerful, blooming power in the spring, and I thought it would be nice to try to get some going over here, and that's what started me off.
And so what did you do? Just started walking along the road with a spade and daffodils in your pocket?
Yes, and I sneaked along the road and put daffodils around thereabouts every single post box on the lid, you see, and I'm very glad I did as well.
And it was just for something to do, for something nice to do for your community.
Yes, that's it.
When I first met Tom, he was walking about 15 kilometers every day. Now that he's 96, he only walks 4 or 5 kilometers a day. Not bad for a local legend. Garlic mustard may be an invasive weed, but Ms. Buckle doesn't mind. She likes it to cook with.
Thanks, Mr. Algie. I'm here in the forest just outside of Stratford, Ontario, with a group of expert foragers. Let's see what they have to find today. All right, Sasha and Hudson, let's see what you can sniff out today. Are you ready? Let's go. It looks like our handy-dandy foragers have found some garlic mustard. Let's learn a little bit. Some garlic mustard. Garlic mustard was brought over by the Europeans as an edible herb and has spread throughout all of North America. It is actually an invasive species. What's an invasive species? An invasive species is an organism that is not originally from a specific location. And once it is brought to that location, it has the tendency to spread and spread and spread, and will eventually cause harm to that environment by completely taking over. As you can see here, the garlic mustard is taking over the entire floor
of the forest in this area. And that is because there is no natural predator. So there are no animals in this area that would eat down or eat on garlic mustard, and that's why it is growing. But here's the great news about this invasive species. It is actually extremely delicious, and I am going to show you how we can turn this invasive species into a delicious pesto. Let's go! To make our garlic mustard into a pesto, we're gonna add about 2 cups of the leaves after they've been washed and picked off from the stems. Start with that. And then we'll add a 1/4 cup of walnuts and 3 cloves of garlic. If you don't like it very garlicky, you could just add 2. And then we will mix it up in our food. For the next step of our pesto, we're gonna add some olive oil, about 1/2 cup. We'll start with 1/4 first, and then we will check the consistency, and then we'll add. And here's the final product, boys. A delicious pesto with a little bit of olive oil and cheese that was left over on top. It's really a win-win for both us and the forest. We are left with this delicious food that we can put on top of pasta or pizza, and the forest has a little bit less garlic mustard in it today.
In part 2 of our series on wild turkey hunting, Mr. Parcher takes us into the back field to show how it's done. Keep an eye out for those porcupines, Mr. Parcher.
2 of my favorite places to hunt are on cut lines like this, where there's been the bush has been logged out and you have some space and the turkeys will naturally move along this corridor, or on the edges of agricultural fields. Bean fields and corn fields are where I've had the most success. If you are interested in becoming a hunter or hunting in Ontario, you need to be 12 years old in order to be able to get your apprenticeship license. When you get your apprenticeship license, you then have to wait until you're 15 to be able to get your actual own tag and hunting license yourself. So if you're an apprenticeship, you have to be sitting next to someone who's at least 18 years old and has a full hunting license, and then use the same gun or bow that that individual is using when you're sitting next to them and you're hunting under their tag. Once you turn 15, you can get your own tag and you can apply to hunt under your own tag for all the different types of animals that we have in Ontario, and you're able to use that tag on your own animal and not have to sit directly next to someone. There's the hunter education course, I believe it's called, as well as the PAL, which is possession and acquisition license. These 2 courses are offered kind of in conjunction with one another, and it's a weekend program that sets you up to be a hunter as well as own and possess firearms in Ontario. You don't need the PAL to hunt in Ontario if you only want to hunt with bows or crossbows, but in order to be able to hunt with a firearm, you have to do that PAL course. So boys, one of the things that we've done, because we're hunting in a bean field that backs right on to our property, is we've built a blind out of natural materials. So I've pulled out a whole bunch of dead poplar that came down in the ice storm and threaded through a bunch of goldenrod and whatnot that have been plowed over, and put it all through here. When you're turkey hunting, you always want to have your back against something firm, as you don't want the turkey to be able to silhouette you if you do move. So you can see I've put up some sticks and stuff like that back there. Any hunting and fishing store sells a wide variety of blinds that you can put up. I'm a firm believer though that natural is best, and so if you can build a natural blind, to do so. If not, those ones that you can get from a hunting and fishing store do work good and work well. You can move around a lot in them, but I personally prefer to have natural materials that the turkeys will be used to, because this blind has been built and been sitting here for over a week, and I know they've walked by and I've seen it multiple times. So as long as I stay still when I'm hunting in there, I'm hoping that the turkeys aren't going to be able to see me or pick me up.
Hey UCC boys, out in the turkey woods right now, just hunted all morning, just saw a bunch of hens. But we did come across these 2 big guys up here having a munch. You see these porcupines are way up top, chowing down, and those are some big ones. They've been hanging out there all morning.
Well, that's it for this week's edition of the Norval News Network. From all of us at Norval to all of you, we hope that you are safe and well, and don't forget, to have fun outdoors. We'll see you next week.